Welcome to Porsches and Prophecy with me, Carl Lawley. Please join us every week as we transform my dusty old Porsche restoration shop into a fun Bible prophecy study where we discuss the prophetic timeline and the crazy current events we're all witnessing around the world. Enjoy. Okay, so what I did this week is I have notebooks full of studies that I've done and things that I'm always looking up, and I'll be reading in the Bible and I'll find some numbers or something that make you go, I wonder if there's more to this. Is this a timeline? Is there something hidden in here? And so I have notebooks full of all this stuff, so I thought I would go back this week and kind of dig some of the things out that I didn't put in the book, and actually some things that I've come across since writing the book. And so I wanted to talk about some of those tonight. And, oh boy, there's some good stuff too. And some things that I haven't totally sort of fleshed out yet, but it's kind of a work in progress, so I'm going to save some of that. So let's start real quick. And I'm just going to start by reading some of this so that I can get my head on straight and go in the right direction tonight. So the encrypted timeline that God hid in the Psalms, it strengthens the biblical fact that the 7-year tribulation period, which is also known as the time of Jacob's trouble from Jeremiah 30, is centered on Israel. So everybody reading the book, you all understand that, right? That the Bible is centered on Israel, and the Psalms are centered on Israel, and the 7-year tribulation period is all about Israel. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. The final week of years is focused specifically on the children of Israel and on the land of Israel and not the Gentile nations. So when you're studying end-time prophecy, just keep in mind that it's all about Israel, and a lot of it will start to make more sense. Because for me, I always approached book of Revelation, for instance, from an American perspective, Western perspective, and it's kind of hard to see, like, especially when you're reading verses I talked about last week about the oppressed. Well, we don't, as Christians, we don't feel that oppressed in America. So it's hard to kind of think of us as being part of the group that's oppressed. But I think also that we can see that that day of oppression is coming. Like, it's already starting. Back years ago when they started talking about hate speech, I knew right then, and doing all these laws, right? It's a very small step from that to saying, because who's to say? The Bible is hateful. That's what they're going to say. That's what they already say. So that day is coming in America also. So from God's perspective, the final 7 years are all about the ultimate redemption of his children, the nation of Israel. However, from the devil's and the Antichrist perspective, and I say that because I truly believe that he is alive and well today, they know they only have a final 7 years to destroy all of the children of Israel so that Israel will be remembered no more. Over the years, I've heard many different ideas about who the Antichrist might be and where he will come from. And I think it's kind of fun to guess at that, even though, we don't really know. There's some clues hidden around in the Bible, like for instance in Daniel chapter 9. But if you go online, you'll see all kinds of people talking about U.S. presidents. The Pope, of course, is always a big candidate for it. Obama, a lot of people talked about Obama. And then there's that crazy painting of him. I think you guys ever seen this painting? Like, all the presidents have a painting that's done during their presidency that hangs in, I don't know, it's probably not the White House. I forget where it's at. But they have all of them. And so they all kind of look stately, and they're like, with a library behind them or something like that. But then here's Obama, and he's got all of these green leaves behind him, and he's sitting in a chair, and it looks like on one of his hands he has a 6th finger hiding under his other fingers. It's really weird. And then if you look at, you have a picture, show them that. You will be my visual aid tonight. Thank you.
Good girl, she's your banner.
Yeah, exactly.
That is wicked.
So that's his picture. So, and then if you really look close at it on a bigger screen, you can see that in the leaves, this isn't part of my teaching tonight, by the way, I'm already off on something, that there are horns above his head. It's made up in the shades of the leaves behind him. And then there's like weird things in the chair, like the way the chair was made and stuff. And something about his feet.
Ew.
Like it looks like Baphomet. Some of the images you see of Baphomet. So it's like a lot of weird Antichrist kind of stuff, right? So people have said for a long time
the
that...
finger thing is really creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that? How it's painted where it looks like there's a sixth finger?
It's tucked in.
Well, do we all know what the six fingers mean?
No, just
It means Nephilim.
That's right.
Nephilim.
That's right.
So when you go back into ancient history, even from the Native Americans, they all have the same stories of six-fingered, six-toed, 2 rows of teeth and red hair giants that were cannibals, and those are Nephilim.
Nice.
And so here you got Obama having a pic. Do you think that was an accident? That the painter, like, he stinks at painting so much that he like goofed that up. Oh man, it slipped, and I just thought, oh well, he's not gonna care. We'll just leave it.
That's on that picture.
Yeah, exactly. So you look at that and you go, yeah, okay, that was definitely done on purpose, but why? You know, Obama isn't the Antichrist. Is he part of the Antichrist system? Oh, absolutely. Biden, I'm not sure that Biden is conscious enough to even know that he's part of it, but he's a puppet and he's part of it, right? But they've all kind of made their bed with the devil. And anyway, the world over right now, I think, is pretty much being controlled by all of these Luciferian people. Now, whether Obama has some Nephilim in him or not, I mean, who knows? I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing, you know, to paint that. So then there's the Pope, of course, and a lot of Christians believe that the Pope right now, I think he's like 83 years old. I don't see him being the Antichrist, and there's actually a lot of reasons why I don't see him being the Antichrist.
And he has a prophet also, like
Yeah, the false prophet.
would that be the Pope?
Well,
It would be
it
the
could
next
be.
one.
I
It would be this one. It would be the next one coming because, like you said, this guy's going to die.
Have you guys ever heard of the prophecy of Saint Malachi? That's crazy, because it's the 112th Pope is the last Pope, right, before the end. And guess what number this guy is?
Is he one?
112.
He's 112.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, not just in the Bible, but a lot of things in other ways that are pointing at this time right
He's
now.
okaying a lot of stuff too, like gay marriage and all that
Yeah.
stuff. For the Catholics,
Yeah.
that's a big deal to okay all that. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
He's like a little fool.
Yeah, and he's a Jesuit. They're hiding a lot of secrets, and I mean, there's, you know, He also said that if aliens make it to Earth, that he wants to baptize them, and just all this kind of really crazy
great.
stuff like that. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys know this, but they actually have a what do you call it, up on a mountain where they look at stars. The Catholic Church. Yeah, but like one of those big ones, right? Like legit.
Like the dome.
Yeah,
ones?
I want to say it's in Utah or Arizona or somewhere like that.
And the Catholic Church has one?
Yeah,
What?
and it's a big deal because they're looking for their people to come down.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Catholic Church, I've said this for a long time, and I'll probably be kicked off of whatever this may end up on, but I think they're like, and I'm not talking about the people, but as a government entity, they're like the biggest cult in the world. You know, when you really start digging under the surface, it's pretty crazy. And then you see all their statues of like St. Peter and stuff, and they're all doing this like thing with their fingers. Well, that's like some kind, I forget. I have all these notes written down what all that means, but it's like something about Jupiter. They're basically, when Constantine kind of merged Christianity with paganism during his time, they brought in all these pagan things, and that's what really stayed, I believe, with the Catholic Church. And then, of course, we had the Reformation, and people started reading the Bible for themselves, and like, wait, I don't see any of that stuff in here, right? And so now, we can read the Bible for ourselves, but back then, the priest or the Pope would read the Bible for you and tell you what it meant, right? That's why they kept it in Latin. They kept the Bible like chained to the pulpit and all these
Yeah.
kind of crazy things. So
My friend said that was because so people wouldn't steal it. And I was like,
yeah,
Please.
yeah.
See, after the rapture, they can just say aliens to people.
Well, that's I totally believe that's the narrative.
Yeah.
There's a section in my book, I can't remember exactly where it's at. It's probably around the Psalm 124 or Psalm 76 area that talks about that, because there have been for decades New Age channelers writing books and articles and stuff for the New Age cult world, who have talked about the exact same thing, that one day millions of people are going to disappear from the planet. It's the planet, cleansing itself, and these aliens are going to come and they're going to take people away. You're not going to see it. It's just they're going to disappear. But they're okay. Don't worry. The Earth just had to rid itself of and it's all based around the Earth, Mother Earth having to cleanse itself.
Satan knows that's coming. So
Yeah, it's all tied in. It's all interconnected. So this global warming stuff, it's all part of it, right? And that's what these people believe. I've got videos, man. Next week we're gonna have a video party because I've got stuff to show you guys that'll blow your mind, right? Especially CERN. You guys know what CERN is? The Large Hadron Collider.
Oh yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah, there's some
It's
crazy
It's
stuff.
a really bad. What is the area? It's around
Well, it was a pagan area.
Worship Satan, whatever was right there.
It's on the border of, I want to say, was it Switzerland and Switzerland and France, I think.
I was gonna say it has to be
maybe.
France.
Yeah. So it's this huge circle, and it is like the Vatican, where they're a government unto themselves. They're not beholden to anybody. CERN is also. So they don't pay taxes to governments. Governments fund them. It's pretty crazy. But that whole thing, and then the tunnel that they built close by there, the if you've ever seen the pagan celebration that they had around building this tunnel, it's crazy. I mean, complete with Baphomet and demons, and it was just insane. And all these dignitaries sitting in the stands bravo,
It's so hard for me to
bravo.
understand why people with a brain would be cool with that.
Yeah.
You have no fear of God?
Well, they don't, because they believe God is the bad guy. God, in their mind, he came into the Garden of Eden and basically told them, don't do this and don't do that, and he was the ogre, the bad guy, and Satan was the one that wanted to set them free. So they have everything. Satanism is the inverse. It's upside down of Christianity, basically, right? And has anybody read about Psalm 50 yet?
In your stuff.
Yeah, so you have. So you understand how Psalm 50 is an Antichrist psalm. There are 6 verses in Psalm 50 that are purely Antichrist, and the rest of them are the tribulation period inverted. Because the Antichrist
So
and...
they think we're misled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they think we're stupid, right? And so when they want to cleanse the planet and they want to control the planet and, have people not eating meat and all these kind of things, right? Which the Bible talks about that too, and prophetically. That's so that their world, the world that they want, with their Luciferian leader in control one day, that they'll get what they want. And they don't care about us.
What do they want?
So what's that?
What do they want?
The planet for them. They want us to be subservient to them.
Satan, they're all slaves of Satan.
You remember the Georgia Guidestones that were blown up a couple of years ago? I mean, it spelled it out right there. Basically that the world should have no more than 500 million people, right? And we're at 8 billion now?
Yeah.
So that means a killing off of a lot of people. And they don't plan to start with themselves, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So they're like, yeah, a lot of people need to die, but not us, of course, while we're flying our jets and going to Davos and all this kind of stuff, right? No, we're the overlords. Everybody else has got to go. Because they consider us just, we're eaters and breathers and breeders. That we shouldn't be here on their planet. And so when these government hacks in our country, even they talk like, they're so for the immigrants or whatever, do you really think they care about these people?
If they need slaves.
Yeah, that's it. Well, they believe that 500 million is all they need, that that's what the planet can support. Or that's what needs to support them, is really what it boils down to.
Elon Musk does a whole talk about how that won't fly. That if we don't start producing more people, there's not going to be enough people to take care of people, especially to produce the things that everybody else is going to need.
Yeah, but nobody's listening to that, because that doesn't fit their narrative. But he's right. He's absolutely right. Most countries like America, and we're not even replacing ourselves. We're not having enough kids to replace ourselves. Europe, same way. There's only a few areas of the world that are actually replacing themselves and then some. Africa, for instance. So we're all being replaced by immigrants now, in our
Muslims
country.
are required, every guy is supposed to produce at least 20 children. Because what they'll do is they'll vote themselves into power. They're doing it.
Oh, here, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And we're paying them to do it.
They come into a city and they just take over. They literally bully everybody right out of their businesses.
Like go to Michigan and see what's going on there.
At least in Tennessee, it's already pretty bad.
Really? Oh, that's scary. Anyway, I don't know where I'm at, but we're just going to put that first page down. Because I think the gist of the first page is that Israel is the centerpiece. They are the focus of what's coming. Which I'd also like to say that goes along with the pre-tribulation rapture view, because there are all these different views, right? But if the focus needs to be on Israel and not the church, then the church doesn't need to be here. Does that make sense? And then also if you go back to, Matthew 16, I want to say, when Jesus said that on this rock I'll build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And then you jump over to Revelation chapter 13, and what does it say? That the serpent, the devil, and the Antichrist, they turn on Israel. Well, actually, I'm sorry. It's either in 12 or 13. I think it's 12. So, where the Antichrist tries to go after the remnant of Israel, which will be in the refuge, Matthew 24:15, and then when he can't get to them, he turns his attention on the offspring, which is the saints at that point, right? Because it's not the church anymore, it's the saints, people who have accepted Christ after the rapture. And it says that he will prevail against them. So, was Jesus right? That you can't have it both ways. So the church cannot be here any longer. It's not the church anymore. The church age, if we had that graphic up here, you'd see that the church age ends at the rapture of the church, and then the 7 years plus, I think, about a year of setup time for the tribulation period, where the Antichrist actually comes to power. During that time, that's no longer the church age. The age of grace is over with. And those people who did not accept Jesus while it was free and easy, well, they're obviously going to regret that, but he will prevail against them. Okay. I'm so far off. This is fun though.
We're still doing this thing, right? Is that the handout you gave us that one time?
No.
You got a different one?
I didn't do a handout tonight.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's actually good.
I'm not going to do handouts anymore.
Because I can't follow along. You're all over the place. It's too hard to follow along.
I totally agree.
And then I wrote so many notes on the first one that you gave me. It was good. But
we do that.
We just write notes to what you're saying. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, air compressor. So, talking about the Antichrist, who is what to Israel?
They think it's a savior.
Yeah, they think he's their Mashiach,
I
right?
think it's the second coming.
Right.
I only know that because I read the book.
Yeah. So they're waiting for their Messiah, who we know already came. And so when we're talking about, when I say Mashiach then, tonight, I'm talking about the Antichrist. Because I kind of mix those terms up, and I know people probably get confused sometimes when I'm talking. So Mashiach, Messiah, and Antichrist are all the same person.
You know what would be helpful on some of your terms? If you did write it down, give a handout on that?
Oh, yeah. So, sort of like what I did with the Rapture thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll put that together. That's a good idea. Yeah. Because actually, in the Bible, there are probably 40 different names for the Antichrist throughout the Bible.
But the ones that you use mostly.
Yeah.
Messiah is a name for the Antichrist?
Well, false Messiah.
Okay.
They believe, so the Jews think that the Messiah who they're waiting on right now, they really believe he's about to come on the scene right now. They believe that will be their Messiah. But he's not, because he's the false Messiah. He's the one that Jesus warned about when he said, I came in my Father's name and you rejected me, but one day one will come in his own name and him you will receive. He's talking about the Antichrist, the false Messiah. So the Jews, the religious Jews, the rabbis, and this goes back for hundreds and hundreds of years, they have the sort of a checklist from all of their sages who have written in the Mishnah, the Talmud, all of these different Jewish writings. They sort of have, you could compile a checklist of what they're waiting for, what they expect their Messiah to be, right? And this also harkens back to why they rejected Jesus, because he didn't fulfill the things that they were waiting for. So Jesus, we know from Isaiah 61 we talked about, and that in Luke where he stepped up to the podium, and he basically took the scroll and he read that first part from Isaiah 61, and he says he's here to set the captives free and heal the wounded and all this kind of stuff. But then he stops before he gets to the part about vengeance and war and all this kind of stuff, right? Well, they were looking for the second part. They were being oppressed by Rome, and they wanted their Messiah to show up and throw off the shackles of Rome and be this mighty David-like warrior king. That's who they're looking for. They're still looking for that. So tonight I wanted to go through kind of the checklist that they have. I listen to a lot of rabbis in their speeches. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard to listen to because they only use English about half the time. So what they do is, as they're speaking in English, the key terms they'll say in Hebrew. And so I'm like trying to check, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? They'll use, they won't say commandments or something, they'll say mitzvah. Okay, well, so you got to figure out what all this means in their terminology. And but I listened to a lot of that. So this is kind of how over the last year or so I've been compiling this list from different rabbis, and then they'll say where they get it from, the Mishnah or whatever, so that when their Messiah, the Mashiach as they call him, when he shows up, they're going to know it's him based on this list. Okay, so number one, he must be from the Davidic bloodline, okay? Because one of the key elements, and this would be number one on their list, is that he has to reestablish the Davidic kingdom or monarchy. So that's not questionable. You hear a lot of people say, I hear a lot of pastors say, and they get this from Daniel chapter 9, that he's going to be a European, he's a Gentile, because Daniel chapter 9 implies that he's the prince from the people who destroyed the temple, basically, right? So that means that it was Rome that destroyed the temple, okay? I agree with that. I completely agree with that. So what I want to point out, though, and this isn't in my notes, but I'm just going to go through this. So if you knew the scriptures before Jesus came, it wouldn't make any sense Okay, when somebody asks you, so where's the Messiah coming from? Well, on one hand, it looks like he's supposed to be in Bethlehem, coming from Bethlehem, right? And then there's also this, this branch text about Nazareth, so he's a Nazarene, and he's got to come from Egypt. So which is it? Well, he fulfilled all three. And so I think that's the case here too. I believe that he will be a Jew. He has to be a Jew, and he has to be from the Davidic, which means the line of Judah, just like Jesus, bloodline, because he has to reestablish the Davidic kingdom. So they will not accept anyone else. If they can't prove that he's from the Davidic bloodline, he is not their Messiah. He is not the one that they've been waiting on. Okay, so will he be from Europe? I think so. I think maybe Eastern Europe. If I had to put money on it, I would say Romania, because of what happened in 1999, which coincides with Psalm 50, which is the Antichrist psalm. It's the dislocated 23-year apart psalm in the Psalms of Asaph. We've covered that a little bit. I know all this sounds crazy. Like if someone's listening to this one day on YouTube, they're going to be like, what is this guy talking about?
What happened in Romania?
Sense. They had that solar eclipse in 1999. I have stuff I want to show you guys tonight. You'll get to see it next week. So in 1999, in August, there was a solar eclipse, and it went across Europe, and its epicenter was in Romania. It just so happens that Romania, the name means citizen of Rome. Okay? And what does Daniel 9 say? Like, kind of alludes to the fact that he's going to be Roman, because that's who tore down the temple, right? So, it doesn't mean he's Roman by blood, but he comes out of Rome. Of course, when the Jews were scattered all over in 70 AD and then 135 AD again, they went all over Europe, and Russia and places like that. That's why there are a lot of them in America and so forth. So, it's not a far stretch to say that he would come out of Europe somewhere. And then the crazy thing is, and this is all stuff that I've figured out since finishing the book, okay? So I knew about the solar eclipse in 99 in August, and which would align with the 50th Psalm in series since 1948, 47, 48, 49 time frame, when Israel became a nation again. Okay, and that's the first and only dislocated Psalm of harvest, Asaph. So, man, I totally forgot where I was going with that. I'm giving too many details.
We were talking about the eclipse.
Oh, the eclipse. Okay, so it gets even better. In the book, I write about the eclipse, and I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing, because even Jesus said that in the last days there's going to be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and then the waves, and the nations are perplexed out of what's coming and all this. So I mean, he points out, just like Genesis 1 does, that we should be looking for signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And then a lot of verses talk about the sun turning dark, going black basically, and then blood moons and things like that. So these are all things we should be looking for. So in the same month, tell me if this is coincidence, in the same month, in August of 1999, there just so happened to be, on the exact same day as the solar eclipse, there was what's called a grand cross in the heavens, where the earth is in the center, and then an alignment of planets happened in a cross. And I don't have any of that written down, but I do have a diagram of it. So like this like never happens, right? So on the 11th of August, there was what's called a grand cross with the earth in the middle, and like the sun and the moon and Jupiter and Mars, and it made a cross shape, okay? And that's a big deal. So guess what? It happened again on the 18th of the same month. 2 grand crosses in 1 month, plus a solar eclipse with its epicenter over Romania. I just don't think that's coincidence. Wasn't there a star associated with Jesus' birth? Don't you think Satan is going to align things to do the same thing? Because he's mimicking everything, right?
Yeah.
So if he's going to like get his little test tube baby all ready to go, that's when it would be, sometime around there. So I'm off totally on a tangent here, but I was studying because of this. I was studying because part of me thinks that he might have actually been born in 1998 and not 1999, mainly because that would then align with him being 30 at the 2028 time period when Israel also turns 80 years old and all of this stuff converges. Okay, so then I got to thinking, so if Satan obviously was alive and well when Jesus was born, right, and he knew when he died, and he knew the whole history of his life and the dates of that, if he's going to mimic that, I don't think, well, number one, I don't think that Jesus was born in, what would you call that, 1 BC? I think he was likely, more than likely born, yeah. He definitely wasn't born at 0. And we know that because I believe Herod, King Herod, who had all the babies killed, I believe he died in 1 BC. But he was alive when Jesus was born, right? So that would put Jesus more like around 2 BC, maybe? Which would align with 1998, basically. 2 years before the turn of the century. We'll try to keep it simple.
Oh, yeah.
So if you go to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's only one. Man, I wrote this down, and now I don't remember which
Yeah,
one.
and he was trying to kill all the 2-year-olds, so that means
2 years or yeah. Which to me, I think he probably did that because he knew he was probably around 1 year old at the time.
So is it
But he just like, let's say 2 and down, that way we make sure we get all of them, right? And so they killed all the 2-year-old and younger babies. So I'm guessing at that time, when the Magi came, and if you read that, only one of the Gospels talks about this. Only one of the Gospels mentions a star. Did you realize that?
Which one?
It's either Matthew or Luke. I don't remember. I want to say it's Luke. The Magi were the only ones following the star, or a planetary alignment, or whatever it was, right? They understood it, but no one else did, because no one else ever mentions it. And we have this beautiful image, like at Christmas, with our little manger scenes, that the Magi were there and the stars above. The Bible doesn't say that, right? More than likely, the star either was afterwards, or when they go to Bethlehem, for instance, it never mentions the star. They're looking for a place to stay. They end up in the manger. There is nothing in there about a star. It's only the Magi who come about a year or so afterwards, that's when they were following a star. So we don't know if the star was above Bethlehem on the day he was born. They knew that a king of Israel was born at some time because they saw the star. They could interpret it. They knew what it meant, but it doesn't mean that it was on that very day. I kind of suspect from the scriptures that it wasn't. So in this case, it could be that 1999 in August is when all this stuff is in the sky, but it could have been a year earlier, perhaps, that when this kid was actually born. I don't know. This is all just speculation. These are the things that keep me up at night, basically, although I do sleep pretty well. So back to the checklist. So he has to be from the line of David, which means that he's also from the line of Judah, because that's the line that Jesus is from. I think it's interesting talking about all of this interconnection. Remember that Genesis 49, in talking about Judah, when he's getting a blessing, it says, this is Genesis 49:10, the scepter will not depart from Judah, meaning that he will be the one that reigns for eternity, which is Jesus. I mean, that's who it's talking about, because Judah is long dead, right? Then you go to Psalm 125, which matches what year?
2025.
Yeah. Verse 3 says, for the scepter, there's that word, of wickedness shall not rest on the land allotted to the righteous, lest the righteous reach out their hands to iniquity. Okay? Now, so the scepter is the symbol of power for a ruler, right? Psalm 125:3 alludes to the fact that the scepter exists, it just won't remain, so it won't stay long, okay? Then you go to what Jesus said in Matthew 24:22. Of course, Matthew 24, we probably all know, is all about the end time, right? Jesus said in Matthew 24:22, "And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, these days will be shortened." So when you compare what he said there to the fact that it will not rest long over the land, lest the righteous reach out their hand to iniquity. Because basically, if everyone fell into sin, because this thing just goes on and on and on, past 7 years, let's say, that eventually everybody's going to have to, they're going to starve, you're going to take the mark of the beast, you're going to do all of these things, which means that no one will be left alive. Though when Jesus then came back, he'd have to literally kill everybody, because no one would be able to endure that time. So I believe that all three of those verses all interconnect. What do you guys think? Yay, nay? Am I crazy? I think Jesus interconnected everything.
It sounds like it listening to you does. And I'm probably going to read this again afterwards, but everything that I've seen that the way you put it together in your book, it's amazing how it all comes together.
Well, thank you. If anybody ever wants a copy of my notes, you're welcome to have them. You might read them and go, "What's this guy smoking?"
There's a 650-page book. Thank you.
Well, yeah. But I'm talking tonight about some stuff that isn't in the book, right?
Killing me.
I know, sorry. I could write another book. I actually say in there, when I'm talking about Psalm 50 and a lot of the Antichrist stuff, that this could literally be a book on its own.
Yeah.
However, I don't think I have time to write that book.
Couldn't you just put a PDF on your Facebook page?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, well, I think so. Although I'm not really good at Facebook. The other day I was trying to just upload a picture. Okay, so I spent hours. It was ridiculous. I was trying to create an event to make this like an official event in Facebook, and it would get the picture from the book and put it up there, and I tried to change it like 28 times, and it will not do it. It will not let me change the picture.
Well, I was trying to give you a review. I gave you like a note about the author, but it wouldn't let me do a review. I tried like crazy.
So yeah, okay. So when I look at it every day, it's like 0 reviews, 0 stars, so it doesn't let you do it.
Nope.
Yeah. Oh well.
I put a comment about the author and let me do that. See if you can see that at least, but I've been trying to do a review and it doesn't let me. It just keeps explaining about reviews, but doesn't actually.
Well, you know all about them now, if you could only do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to continue. And I'm really sorry about this, but I'll make up for it next week. That Grand Cross thing in August, literally in the same week, that's just too much, right?
Yeah.
That's just too much. So according to rabbis, their Mashiach will save the Jewish nation and fight their wars. The Gog-Magog invasion, this is according to the rabbis, must happen before he rises, or they believe that he might rise out of the Gog-Magog war. Like he might be a war hero that comes out of that time. He will be anointed with holy oil to rule the nation of Israel. He will gather the Jews back to Israel. Anybody remember Psalm 126? And then its sister psalm, which is 78, I believe, talks about how God has done great things for our nation, and it talks about the regathering of Israel. Both of them talk about the same thing. So that's after the Antichrist has taken power, and he's now ruling, at least over Israel, and he is bringing the children of Israel back to the land of Israel. That's one of the things that he has to do, and then they'll go, I think this guy's the Messiah, because look, he's doing all of this. He signed that treaty, which we're going to build our temple in 2027, and everything's going to be great. Remember, why does he have to bring all the Israelites back to Israel?
To destroy them.
Yeah, he's leading them back like lambs to the slaughter. He will rule over a prosperous nation. Now that sounds crazy during the tribulation period, right? But what did we talk about a week or two ago?
That's how he draws them all.
Yes, I think the people read the prophecies about the tribulation period and they think, well, the first 3.5 years are going to be pretty cool, man. It's not going to be bad. No, it's going to be pretty cool in Israel. The rest of the world is going to be hit hard, which is going to make them want to all like, hey, you know, if the grass is truly greener over there, we're going there, right? And Israel is going to be like, you know, nobody else is welcome, just the Jews get to come in, right? Unlike America right now. So that kind of explains how come, you know, during the tribulation, at least Israel is going to look like a pretty tempting place to move to. So he will then usher in an era of peace for Israel and the world. They believe that the whole world is going to see this guy and like what he's doing in Israel, and they're all going to just like love him and want him to be their ruler too. They believe he will be responsible, not physically, but responsible for the building of their third temple in Jerusalem. Now remember, they have to have the red heifer before that. And we're living in a time where after 2,000 years, they have 5 red heifers, one of which they're going to, you know, burn, unfortunately, for the cow.
All that trouble to get the perfect red heifer, they're going to burn.
Yeah.
Why do they have 5? Is there any reason why they have
Just
like...
Yeah, because they were young when they found them in Texas, and they have one rabbi who his sole job is to check these red heifers. He's been going all over the world for decades, I believe, right? I've got a picture of him with his little magnifying glass. He's like looking at cows, and they can't have more than like one non-red hair. Their hoofs have to be perfect. Like they can never have had a yoke on them. They can't have a piercing, like you know how they tag cows. Can't have any of that. They can't have scars. They can't have anything. So according to the Bible, this cow has to be perfect. So when a farmer, a cattle rancher in Texas said, hey, buddies, I got these 5 perfectly red young heifers. I think they have to be more than 2 years old, and they weren't there yet. I think they probably are now.
They probably got a good chunk of money for them.
I think $500,000 apiece.
Yeah, so that's why he's... Yeah,
something crazy like that, yeah. That's a lot of hamburger you can buy with that. But, so the likelihood of all of them making it and still being perfect by the time, according to their, you know, scriptures basically, and a lot of this is in the Bible, a lot of it comes from their sage, who they call Rambam, was Maimonides. He's 800 years ago maybe, was when he was living and writing. So a lot of what they believe comes from their own texts and not necessarily out of the Torah, okay? But, so they have their oral tradition, and so this is what they firmly believe, just as equal to the Bible. So they go by that. So basically, if they have a backup plan. It's kind of like when I look at this and I think, wow, how amazing how God ties all this together. When David was going to slay Goliath, he picked up 5 stones, but he only needed 1. And here we're in a time when we only need 1 cow, but they got 5. I did 4 for some reason. We got 5, but we only need 1. It's a pattern. Like there's a pattern again, right? I think that's pretty cool. So, he will restore the priesthood to the new temple that he'll be responsible for building, and he will reinstate the sacrificial system. PETA is going to love that. Jerusalem will eventually be the center of government worldwide. So those are the things that they're waiting on, right? Do you know in Revelation where it talks about the kingdoms basically giving their power over to the Antichrist? That's what this is. That's a picture of that, where Jerusalem, where he's going to set himself up in the temple and declare that he's God, and they hand over their power. He's now the world ruler. And I believe that happens around 2028, according to the
He
Psalms.
declares himself God?
Yeah, that's Revelation chapter 12. And that's what's called the abomination of desolation.
We'll write that with a small g.
Yes, little g God, that's exactly right. Yeah,
That's this. It's repeating itself because that's already happened also, right?
Antiochus Epiphanes, yeah.
And so this is he's just doing what that.
Yeah.
Now this is the real.
Now he sacrificed a large pig,
Yeah.
and I've got some stuff.
Yeah.
I've got some stuff tonight that unfortunately I don't have visuals, but I want to talk about that blew my mind. Okay, that all ties into this, but again, it's stuff that I didn't really have down in my notes when I was writing the book. So since then, there's a lot more evidence. There's no proof, right? But a whole mountain of evidence that all of this interconnects. Okay, so that's what they're expecting for their Mashiach. That's the picture that they paint when they think about. That's why they didn't accept Jesus, right? Because what happened after Jesus, the temple was destroyed. So they look at that and go, he was a false Messiah. They call him a false Messiah. And because none of these things happened, like everything fell apart after him, so how was he the Messiah? Okay, so here's what they believe the world is going to look like just prior to their Messiah arriving. And when I read this, you're going to realize this is why they're looking for him really, really seriously now. They think he's coming very soon. So in their teachings, they believe that the time before their Messiah is called the birth pangs of Mashiach. Imagine that. We use the same terminology, right?
Well, that's why you use that wording.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why you did that.
Exactly. It's going to be a time of chaos. There will be a series of troubles and evil rulings from leaders and governments. Do we have that today? Governments just doing really crazy, evil, backwards things, like think about abortion and all that, right? Even in Israel, abortion is legal. You can imagine such a thing.
All the gay stuff and all the
Yeah,
gay stuff.
Tel Aviv is eating up with it.
Capital for gays.
Yeah. There will be famines, epidemics, inflation, poverty, suffering, nations fighting against nations, cursing and blaspheming of God. Do we have all that today? Like in spades, right? Arrogance will rise. They call that like chutzpah, right? It's more than just like being proud. It's like kind of in God's face, you know, that kind of arrogance. Like I'm God, basically. Inflation and poverty will rise. Governments will be corrupt and godless. Heresy will prevail, which is the belief against biblical truth. Here's a crazy one. The Galilee area, including the lake, right, the Sea of Galilee, will be destroyed, and the highland area will lie desolate. Now, I believe that ties in with the Gog-Magog war, because when they're coming down from the north, well, that's where the Galilee is. It's in northern Israel. And if you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, you'll see that that whole area, more than likely, that area is going to be littered with bodies and equipment and all kinds of stuff. So I think that's what that's referring to.
Is that where that little party was at? On the 27th?
No, that was down towards the south. That was more like the Negev area. It would have been just east of Gaza where that was going on. And you'll notice no one talks about that, but that was not a good thing on God's land, you know. It's sad. It's tragic what happened, but
It's still happening.
yeah.
Well,
Oh yeah.
If they're alive, anybody.
The day after the attack, I was watching the news about it, and they were interviewing different people, and they interviewed a girl who had just got married. She was actually getting married at the time of this attack, and she said, yeah, my wife and I were so frightened and all this stuff.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So she made it out alive.
Yeah. So anyway, so we've got the Galilee being destroyed, the Galilee area. The Gog-Magog war and other catastrophic events will take place. I think those are linked. The young will not respect the elderly. Devin. And doesn't that sound like 2 Timothy chapter 3? Because a lot of this stuff Paul talked about when writing to Timothy in chapter 3. He basically kind of gave the same kind of thing. Makes me wonder if some of these Jewish sages weren't like secretly like, let's see what Paul said, right? Yeah, so here's what we've come up with, right?
Happens to be.
Yeah, wow, it's almost word for word what Paul said. Let's see, so also the son of David, meaning their Mashiach, will not arrive until informers are everywhere. Now that one is a mystery to me. I'm not really sure what that means. I'm going to have to do some more digging on it. But it sounds like spies, and it sounds like maybe even the surveillance world we live in now, the AI, tracking everything, monitoring everything. And maybe when that was written, they didn't really know what it meant either, right? But now we live in that world. A lot of things start to make more sense now. So does everybody kind of have an idea of what they're waiting for from the Messiah? Which means that in my mind, the coming Antichrist is going to check all of those boxes. He's going to be exactly, like Satan has got this guy set up, he's exactly what they're waiting for. A few things that I didn't put on my list, they also believe that he will be a Torah scholar. Like he will be able to just rattle off
Have you
all
seen?
of them.
Have you seen some of these? There was two, I think, young guys
Yeah.
who were like incredible about
Yeah.
the way they can quote like the whole thing.
Right.
Young guys, and they play instruments and
Yeah. The black hat, the
and
black
they're
outfit.
treating them like they're
Royalty.
kind of royalty.
Yeah. So, oh man, I wish I could remember his name. I did a little research on him. I think he's 37 or 38. He's not the Antichrist. Not only that,
Well, the ones I saw were kids.
Oh really? Oh, there's one
Which
who's
is why it was so
already got a
surprising.
beard and everything.
No, there was a couple that were kids.
Yeah.
And there was two of them. One they said they thought was really amazing, and then this other one came out and he was even better. And they were just like they worshipped him.
Huh.
Yeah, like they literally like kept him all careful and like had him sit a certain place, and then they had him like reciting stuff. And I mean they really like bowing down to this kid.
You'll have to show me that, because I know about one guy, and his name is like in my head, I just can't spit it out. And he plays the piano, and they worship him. I mean, you got a whole room full of the Orthodox Jews with their black hats and the ringlets and all that stuff, and they just like hanging on every word, right?
Yeah.
So they're looking at these people, and they're thinking, because they're so hungry for their Mashiach to arrive, they're hoping that one of these guys is him. But he doesn't check all the boxes. He's not a great warrior. These Orthodox Jews, they don't go in the military. In Israel, everyone is required to serve unless you're one of them. So I think this guy, he's going to come along. He's going to probably come out of the Gog-Magog war. He's going to be like David. And he's going to be a Torah scholar. He's going to know, I don't think he's just going to know the Torah. I think he's going to know the Quran, the Christian Bible, because what's he going to do? He's going to try to merge all of these, right? So he's going to be the guy that comes along and see, like when you're reading the Bible, I think Manuel had asked, well, why is all this kind of encrypted, right? Well, he's going to come along and he's going to say, well, let me tell you what your Quran means when it says this, and how that in the Torah, this is what this means. And over here in the Christian Bible, for those of you, see this, they're all really the same. That's what's going to happen. The Hindu, the whatever, they're all going to be like, oh wow, this guy's so great. He explained it all. He's so wonderful. I think that's what's coming. But it's focused on Israel. He has to set himself up in the temple, which means they have to build the temple. What's there now, the Dome of the Rock, has to be destroyed somehow. I keep thinking, with how they shoot these missiles out of Gaza, and Hezbollah, they shoot these dumb rockets, right, that just land wherever they land.
Yeah.
How crazy would it be that they shoot one and it just happens to blow up their own thing, their own Dome of the Rock? Because, I mean, it's not going anywhere in particular. They're just shooting them. You know?
Yeah.
If it hits something, they're happy. But they have the Iron Dome system. Okay, so I'm just going to say this. This is Carl's crazy time. If I were Benjamin Netanyahu, I would have the Iron Dome system programmed to where when they see their trajectory of those missiles and it's going to hit the Dome of the Rock, back off, don't shoot anything, let it go. That's what I would do. Destroy that sucker, right? And I think how have you noticed, and I can't say too much about this, but have you noticed when you look at the video footage and the pictures of how Israel's going through Gaza, they're basically mowing it down.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not just like going knocking door to door, any Hamas in here. They are mowing the place down. What's behind them is flattened.
Yeah.
Anybody ever think, is that on purpose? I think so.
It's gotta be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're leaving, it's rubble. I mean, they could come in with bulldozers and start building new stuff for someone else rather than the so-called Palestinians. Anyway, I think this is all part of it. But that's just speculation.
You see that they were showing footage, they were showing the Israel army marching a bunch of Palestinians, soldiers, they said, just like had them stripped down to the
Yeah, just their Unterhosen. Yeah.
Unterhosen.
They're tighty whities.
Yeah. And it was probably cold outside too, they're running around like that. It looks like a bunch of them.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah. On one hand, it's kind of tough because it's sort of like America. I love America, but I hate our government. I hate what it's become. I think I look at Israel like that. I love Israel. We're supposed to love Israel. We're supposed to pray for Israel, for their salvation, for peace, right? But when you look at governments, I kind of want to like Netanyahu, but, I don't know. It's really hard. It's hard to say these people are righteous. Nobody's righteous. So, they're doing what they're doing. But I do think that it all has a purpose, and it's all kind of coming together right now. I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about interconnects with what's happening there right now. It's setting, okay, I'm just going to say this. Think about if you're in control and you know that this Antichrist guy is about to come to power. And I'm not saying they know this, but somebody does, right? Okay? Because when, then Prince Charles at COP26 stands up there and says, something like, with trillions of dollars at his disposal, speaking of this mysterious him, who he never said who it is that he's talking about this hidden ruler, right? The one who's really pulling the strings, I think, at this point. There are people who know the Antichrist, he's out there, they know who he is, and he is probably the mastermind, the puppet master, the Emperor Palpatine, without the ugly face, of what's going on in the world. He's running both sides. But anyway, so my point is this. If you know that in 2026, according to the Psalms, you need to regather Israel back to Israel, right? You probably need a little more land. Just saying. Because Israel's a really small country. If you're going to take all the Jews from America and Europe and wherever they're scattered to, and you're going to bring them all back, you're going to need a little more space. Kind of handy that we get to clear out Gaza here, guys. And it's all rubble behind us, and
well, the people we heard talking about it after it happened, they said there is just no way that the country with the best info, the best intelligence on the planet didn't know that something
they let it slide. I think so. Yeah. They knew.
That land should
Because obviously that gives them the
that
justification.
land should have always been Israel's to begin with. I mean, they should have never moved in there. Nobody else wants
See,
it.
I agree. God says don't divide my land, right?
Yeah, I think God just mad.
And didn't England take a bunch of it?
Well, this is how all this mess started. So it was the part of the Ottoman Empire, right? Then in 1917, Great Britain, basically took over this land in World War I, including all of what we call Jordan and such today, right? And they kind of dealt with it for, a decade or so, a little more. And there was all this fighting and everything. The Arabs, they're always wanting to fight and kill everybody else and kick the Jews out and such. So they just finally said, we're out of here, guys.
Yeah.
So we're not, you have it. But so a lot of under the, it'll come to me probably tonight as I'm sleeping. Whatever agreement, the Balfour Agreement, I believe is what it's called, or something like that. Balfour Declaration. Also, the Rothschilds have a lot to do with all this.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, so it gets a little crazy when you start digging in. You start scratching under the surface here. So the Balfour Declaration, and then there was another declaration that was in 1917, and then a little bit later, they basically were going to partition all of this land, and Israel was going to be pretty sizable. But then, of course, the Arabs made a big stink, and there was all this political infighting, and ends up that Israel gets this little sliver, and they created Jordan. Jordan didn't exist. That's not a people, and it was never a country.
Right.
But they took. So when they talk about the Palestinians, that was supposed to be Jordan. But the ones that didn't want to leave Israel and wanted to stay in that land, and I don't blame them. I mean, think about it. I got my little hut. I got my camel. I got a beach over here. I'm good. Yeah. But they didn't want to make it work with the Jews. The Jews said, yeah, we're okay with them staying, right? But then what the ones who stayed wanted, they want all of it. They would never ever agree to peace. They wouldn't agree that Israel can even exist. And so they fought every step of the way, and they're still fighting. So you look at it, I try to look at it from God's perspective. In Genesis 12, he basically said to Abraham, all of this is going to be for your descendants, right? And so we're not supposed to divide the land of Israel. It's already been divided. I mean, there is this tiny little bit of land. I pray every night for Israel, for their salvation, for peace, like Psalm 122, one of our Psalms talks about, right? Especially right in the middle of all this. And but also I pray for the Arabs who were called Palestinians, which isn't a nationality, right? But it's not a people group. But, because a lot of them are just, kids, and they're being taught things, and then they grow up believing, killing and death and all this stuff. I mean, I feel it's tragic what's happening. But anyway, I'm way off now. But anyway, does that all kind of make sense?
It all goes together, Carl.
I think so. And I think the fact that the land is being cleared, even though no one's saying it's for this coming purpose, it's just kind of funny that the land's being cleared, right?
Yeah, because you're not moving back to that. They're not.
No. I'm not sure what's going to happen to them, because Egypt doesn't want them. They don't want to open their border and let them in.
Jordan doesn't want them.
No.
Nobody wants them.
Somebody said the reason nobody wants them is because they're too closely married, and that they have all kinds of issues, that they're not that
Well, they just wanna
smart, that they
fight.
have
All they have is
health
hate.
issues. It's like when when cousins marry cousins.
Yeah.
They're saying nobody wants them.
Well, I mean, even
Because
back to
they're all stuck.
Ishmael and then Esau, their quote blessing was something, akin to your descendants will be wild asses of men and fighting with each other and fighting everybody else. Hello?
Yep, they do.
Has anything changed? Is the Bible right? Yeah, the Bible's right. Okay, I just said something that really troubles me though, because when you listen to these rabbis, they believe that Esau is us. They believe the West is Esau. They believe the Arabs are Ishmael, but through intermarrying with Rome, they believe that the West, like the unrighteous West, is what they consider Esau today. So then when you look at what happens to the Edomites, which is Esau in the Bible, how God destroys them when Jesus comes right? His clothes, this is in Isaiah, his clothes are covered in blood, and because he goes through Edom basically and kills all of them. They say that's us. So I hope not. I don't think so. Not Christians, not those who are his, right? Called by his name.
They look way more like Esau, because it says every time you build something, I'm going to destroy it. All their descendants. I hate their... No,
Yeah.
it says because I hate their descendants, and every time they build something, I'm going to destroy it.
Yeah,
Well,
Esau I hated, right.
We just keep building and building and building. It doesn't get destroyed. It wasn't like a one-shot destroyed. Every time you build something, I'm going to destroy it. That looks like them. Every time they build something, it gets destroyed.
Yeah.
Generation to generation
They
to
would want us to do
generation.
that, not them.
No, but
Yeah.
it hasn't happened generations yet.
Yeah, see, I don't
Every time
think
they build
we
something-
are Esau. I
Right.
believe that,
They build a house, it falls down. They build it again, it falls down.
yeah.
So what do you believe, Kyle?
I believe if you go back and look at the genealogy in the Bible, you see that Ishmael, who was Abraham's son through a concubine, the handmaiden basically, that Ishmael has descendants, and then Esau marries into the Ishmael family. And when you listen to people talking, Muslims talking about their, like we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? We go through that line. They go through Ishmael and Esau. So I think the Western whiteys, all of us basically, I think we're not Esau. I think Rome, yeah. I think that the Bible probably considers us sort of like the remnants of Europe, Rome, whatever. If you're looking at that,
Don't forget, I'm half Punjab.
that's okay. We'll let you stay.
And I stay. I don't know if I want
I mean, we're all mutts.
That's right.
There's no telling. If one day we'll know, like, oh
I'm
man,
not that
really?
much of a mutt. You guys are more mutts. I actually am more purebred. I am German and Punjab. My parents spoke their languages.
It's
I'm
mutt.
the immigrant. Yeah, I'm not muddy. You guys are muddy.
I'm muddy. Well, I'm German and English, but on
That's
either side, I don't know
the
how
same thing, yeah.
messed up all that is, right?
Yeah.
It might be interesting. So, okay, here's something I want to start. So we're all cool on the Antichrist. Basically, we kind of get the picture of what the rabbis, today's rabbis, yesterday's Pharisees, what they're waiting for. It gives us a good idea of what this guy's going to show up and how he's going to be. The Psalms give a lot more detail. So if you read in the book, you can read my sort of synopsis of Psalm 10, which is an Antichrist psalm. Psalm 50, I talked about, it has 6 very specific Antichrist verses in it. Interesting that it's 6, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, as you guys are going through your week, if you have questions about any of that, I would love to answer them. And I got questions, and I love that. So, but I want to talk about some other things right now that I've been studying, and I just think are like, wow, it all ties in, but it's not in the book. So we were talking a little bit about Abraham. I want to mention something here. In Genesis chapter 12, it points out that Abraham was 75 years old. Okay. That's interesting. Like, why did we need to know his age? How old is Israel right now?
Are we 75?
Yeah, 75.
I heard
right?
I heard one of their leaders talking, and they were emotional, saying, "We're going to make it past 80."
Yeah. Well, I had 4 slides that, if this were working, you'd be looking at right now, that talk about that. And guess who else knows about their 80-year curse? The Muslims.
Yeah.
Al Jazeera and all their news outlets, they're talking about it. They know that it's time to attack.
Well, the Israeli leaders are openly discussing
Yeah.
it, talking about it, saying like, "We're gonna beat it this time."
Right. Yeah, it's a real thing. There's no doubt about it. So Abraham was 75 in Genesis 12. Okay. This is really crazy. So Israel was reborn in 1948. Okay. The oral Torah that the rabbis talk about all the time, they have all of their genealogy and history. We have some of this in the Bible, but it's kind of confusing sometimes, because think about it. If you were born on the last day of a year, right? You would still be put down that you were born in, like, let's say 1948, but really a day later it's 1949. So it gets kind of confusing, but they have that Abraham was born in 1948 BC. That he started teaching when he was 52 years old, teaching about the one God, right? Because everything, they worshipped all these demon gods back then and statues and stuff. That puts him basically being a preacher at exactly the 2,000 year mark. Remember our little timeline up there?
Yeah.
At 2000, well, literally, according to the rabbis, at exactly 2000, that was Abraham at 52 years old, okay? So now, if you think about that, forget all that, though. That's just interesting, because we're going in two different directions in time. Abraham was born in 1948. Israel was born in 1948. Forget that it's working backwards, right? 75 years later, God called Abraham to come out of the land that he was in and to go to Canaan, which was what we call the promised land, right? Just saying. Is that kind of interesting, right? Okay. I think that's pretty crazy, actually. It gets even better, though. Because again, why did God point out some of these years, right?
Yeah.
And then if you go back to the book of Jasher, actually, I believe that Moses gave us the Cliff's Notes, I love him for it, of history, of like 2,000 years of history up until this time. Because all of these books existed, he didn't have to like rewrite everything. Because the book of Jasher, the book of Jubilees, more than likely already existed at that time. And so they give more detail, though. Okay, a lot of the things that you read in the Bible and you go, oh, that's interesting. I'll give you an example. Do you ever wonder why Esau comes in and Jacob's got the little bowl of lentil stew, right? And Esau's like willing to sell his birthright for a bowl of soup? And then what does he say? And this isn't in my notes, I'm totally off here. He says like, well, I'm going to die anyway, right? Well, why does he say that?
He was starving.
No, he wasn't starving. He was out hunting.
I know, he brings food home.
You know, if you go back to the book of Jasher, it gives the whole backstory. He had just killed Nimrod. He cut his head off. And all of Nimrod's folks were chasing him. And so he expected to not live through the day. So he's just like, I'm going to die anyway, right? So the Bible doesn't tell us all of that. It just tells us, he just makes this odd statement like, I'm going to die anyway.
They left out a lot.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
took his books out.
So it had been prophesied that a descendant of Abraham was going to kill Nimrod, right? And then also Nimrod, but then it's weird because it doesn't look like what actually happened in the very same book. So you think, if I was writing this book and it's just like I'm making all this up, it's like not real, right? I'd make sure that everything aligned, but it's completely different. And then it also keeps saying, in the latter days, this is going to happen to Nimrod. Have you guys gotten far enough in the book? What I'm talking about, Nimrod, Gilgamesh, Osiris? Okay.
You know, it's hard to remember all this stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Your brain is going on a different level.
Not sure what level that is. Half the time it's turned off. I walk from there to there and I think, dang, what was I going to get?
I do that.
And then I stand there like, I don't know. I have to go back and
I go
repeat
back.
what I was doing.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I went back to where I was when I thought of it, and then it comes to me.
I start writing or putting little strings on my fingers or something. Anyway, so let me try to get through this real quick because I'm totally off on the Nimrod thing now. Okay, so from the age of 75, which is where Israel is right now, until 85, so there's a 10. Before that, according to the book of, I think it's Jasher or Jubilees. I may have those two confused. I have it written down in my notes. There was a 70 when God told him basically, you're going to move out of this land. That was at 70. At 75, he said basically, pack your stuff, you're moving. That happened at 75. And then it's 10 years later that all these things happen, right? Do you see the 5 and the 10 in a 15-year pattern? Of course, we know.
The steps and
Yeah, exactly. And it's specifically broken down. It's not just a 15-year thing. It's specifically broken down 70 to 75, and then 75 up another 10 years, basically. So here's what happens. Let me just make sure. Oh, let me say this real quick. So the Bible tells us that when Abraham was specifically 75 years old, God told him to leave for the promised land of Canaan. He departed from Haran, which means mountain or mountain near, mountain man, basically mountain. And he traveled to Canaan, which of course we call the promised land. He stopped at the terebinth tree. Anybody get to the terebinth tree in the book? I got a whole thing about the terebinth tree.
Where is it?
That's going to be, in chapter...
If it's before 38, no.
No.
I read 38 and finished from there.
Yeah, no, it's, I don't remember what chapter it is, but I've got a whole thing on the terebinth tree. It's really, really interesting. So it's just weird how, you notice when God points something odd out like that? Okay, so it says that he traveled to Canaan. He stopped at the terebinth tree of Moreh. The Lord then appeared to him again, and he moved to the mountain east of Bethel, which means house of God, and Ai, which means heap of ruins. So he lived on a mountain, and on one side of the mountain was the house of God, Bethel, and on the other side was a heap of ruins. Translated from their words. All these words have meaning, right? What any of that means, I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think I know.
What do you think?
Well, think about when Moses was called up the mountain, right? It's like a form of rapture. Like he went up the mountain, everybody else stayed down there. And when you read a lot of the, well, think about it this way. So here's the earth, here's the heavens. A mountain is sort of in between, right? It's in the clouds. But we can't go to the clouds, but we can climb a mountain and be in the clouds, right? Well, so where is Jesus going to meet us at the rapture? In the clouds, right. So I think all these things are symbolic, okay? So when you think about he's moving from one place and he's going up a mountain and he's in the clouds, so to speak, and it's literally the place next to him is called the house of God in Hebrew, right? These things should get our attention. And then you look at the age, 75 years old, maybe 76 by this time when he actually gets there. So we're not told how long it took to get there, right? So let me go through this real quick. So from the age of 75 to 85, here's what happened to Abraham. So shortly after arriving in the promised land, he was 75 to 76 years old, I'm speculating. He went to Egypt because there was a famine, remember, in the land. So God tells him to move, and when he gets there, there's a famine. So he moves to Egypt. Then approximately 10 years later is the next time that the Bible tells us, basically gives us a date, right? And that's right around the time when Ishmael was going to be born. It basically says he was 86. So if you back up to the end of all the stuff that happened, you'd be around 84, 85, something like that. So Israel was reborn in 1948. They're now 75 years old. That puts us on the 5th step up on the Psalms of Ascent steps, leaving another 10 steps or 10 years to go. We're kind of in the same timeline that God put in there for us to find about Abraham. I believe, I think you all know that I believe that the Antichrist is probably around 25 years old now. I believe that he was born, like I said, around 98, 99, so he's probably 25, 26. There's a lot of reasons that I believe that. I want to point something out that I've discovered recently. I heard a rabbi giving a speech, and he kind of made reference to this, like as if A lot of them, the rabbis, kind of know this. And it just floored me, like, wow, okay, so I went and looked this up. So if you take the year that they believe it is, which is 5784. Okay, the Jewish year is 5784, and you find the 5784th verse in the Bible. This is crazy. Okay. The 5784th verse, which if it aligns with the year, okay, this is what it says. So remember, this goes back, the start of their year was in September, okay? Right after that happened October 7th, right? Here's what the verse for this Jewish year says. It's in Deuteronomy 32:25. Outside, the sword will take their children, and inside, terror will strike the young man and the young woman, the infant and the gray-haired man. Does that get your attention? This happens to be in what's called the Song of Moses. He gave this prophetic song right before he died, right at 120 years old. 120th Psalm, 120 years told to Moses. These numbers are all really important, right?
It was Deuteronomy 22:35.
32:25. So notice that that's the 25th verse in there. That puts the first verse, if it's by years, at 1999, when this thing starts. And then I'm trying, I think I pretty well got it figured out. I don't have anything tonight about the following verses, but I have deciphered it based on the Psalms, and they all match. But after this verse, it's no longer one verse, 1 year. It's like a grouping, like 3 verses, and then it all matches exactly what's in here. It's crazy. And I didn't know about this until just a couple weeks ago, and so, again, this is what I do in my spare time. So, again, notice that we're at the 25th verse of the Song of Moses. That means if there is a year-for-year correlation, then the first verse matches the year 1998, 1999. That's the 50th year of Israel's rebirth. It also represents the Antichrist according to the encrypted timeline in the Psalms, matching Psalm 50, and there are 6 Antichrist verses of that psalm. So, here's where I really wish that I had the overhead. Because about a month before October 7th, a rabbi, who I watch this guy occasionally, who studies the ELS or Torah codes, he found a code based on what he was looking at. Before the new year, he's always looking for codes that talk about that year number, 5784. Here's what he found in September before October for the year 5784, okay, in the Torah codes. This blew my mind. This was like September 15th, I think. In the Torah codes, based on ELS spacing, equal letter spacing, everybody kind of understands what that is a little bit. It only works in the Torah. You can take like every 10th letter and see if it spells a Hebrew word, and then if you string that together and it continues, it spells words, sentences, and all this. So here's what he found in this ELS code. Amalek. Does everybody know who Amalek is? Okay, remember when Israel came out of Egypt, the first group of people they were attacked by was the Amalekites. And what did they do? They didn't attack them front on. They went to the weak, the women and children, and the elderly at the back of the line, and they killed them. That gives me chills, because that's exactly what just happened. No one was fighting against these people. They came in and they killed the weak, right? They didn't, yeah. Anyway, so that's the first thing. Moses, Elijah, PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, Temple, These are all words that were in the CLS. Magog, hello. Khomeini, Iran, Hamas, and then there were 2 scriptures. When you go out to do battle on your enemies was in there. And this is crazy because it comes from Leviticus 23:40 was in there. It states, now Leviticus 23 is the 7 feast days. That's the chapter that gives you all about the feast days. And it says, the fruit of godly trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. Those are the 4 spices and branches that the Jews are supposed to bring together at the Feast of Tabernacles, and for 7 days they do a blessing with those elements and wave and celebrate with that. It's according to Leviticus 23, verse 40. Okay? I'm getting thirsty. And so what does that say? That points to Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. And again, remember that Kaduri, he had said October 7th and the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles would start the Gog-Magog invasion. And that's exactly what happened. And so this guy finds this ELS Torah code that has all of these things that are all about what's happening now in the Gog-Magog invasion, based around also the Feast of Tabernacles.
Did he give a public thing about it?
No.
So then how do we know that he actually did that on that day? The rabbi.
Oh, I have it. He did it that day. It's on YouTube.
So he did a YouTube video?
It's dated that day. So,
That's what I'm asking.
yeah. No, he didn't go back and say, hey, I found this back before it happened.
Yeah, he actually did.
I follow this guy, so I actually had already copied his video. There's a way that you can like copy it. I don't know if that's something that every computer has, or I have something special. But I'm trying to think what it's called right now. But anyway, so I copy a lot of this stuff and just keep it on my computer in case it gets taken down. Then I still have it. And it's dated like September 7th or something like that. So, yeah, it's crazy. So, now I want to go into our last little part here. This is crazy too. Maybe we should call this Freaky Friday. Because, like, this isn't stuff that other people talk about, right? So, previously, over the last few weeks, I've talked about how some of the messianic figures in the Bible and in history all became or started their rule at the age of 30, right? Like, so there's Joseph and David and Jesus, and then from historical rabbinical texts, Nimrod also started he became king at age 30. So there's this 30-year-old connection. Let's see. So we're going to go down through some more of these historical figures that are sort of Antichrist figures in the Bible, and also in history. So we'll start, we already know about Nimrod. We're going to do Nebuchadnezzar, right? So when Daniel and his buddies were hauled off to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar was the king. So guess how old he was? No, he wasn't, actually. I have no idea how old he was. So he's the one I don't know how old he was. However, think about this. Remember that it's in Daniel chapter 4, I think, that he spent 7 years as a beast? Does that, like, perk your interest? Like, wow, so there's this Babylonian king who for 7 years was literally a beast in the field. Do you guys remember that story?
Yeah.
Go back and read Daniel chapter 4. It's crazy. Okay? Because he wouldn't worship the true God. But so afterwards, after the 7 years are up and he became a man again.
And that was Nebuchadnezzar?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like one of the really crazy, this is Freaky Friday. One of the crazy parts of the Bible you think, really? That's just nuts, right? Well, there's a reason why it's in there. There's a reason why God made him a beast, right? Like Mark of the Beast that's coming, for specifically 7 years.
So that's when they saw the finger on the right.
No, that was later. That was his
when he
son.
got killed the next day, or whenever the hair was killed. I thought there was something happened right when he turned to it.
Yeah, no, that was actually his son, Nebuchadnezzar's son. So they had all the elements from the temple, and he was having a big party, probably an orgy or whatever, with all that. And then the finger comes in there,
Next days.
tinkle, tinkle, jibby jebby, whatever. I can't remember what the actual words were, but basically, yeah, you've been found wanting.
Yeah.
I mean, he's dead. Let's see, so that's Nebuchadnezzar. He spent his 7 years as a beast already. So then we have Alexander the Great, who is also in Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 11. Alexander came to Judea at around the age of 24 or 25 years old. He did not attack Jerusalem. He was conquering everything, right? But when he came to Jerusalem, he did not attack, because he had a dream, and he saw the high priest and how he was dressed in white, and he had a turban, and he had all the jewels and stuff like that. He saw this in a dream, and he knew that he was not allowed to attack this place, right? He did take over Gaza and all, but not Jerusalem by military force. So this is where it gets interesting. So he was like around 25 years old when he went there, and he passed through, and he went on and conquered Egypt, and then he circled back and he went over to other lands and conquered those. The height of his empire was when he was 30 years old. Like, his empire didn't get any bigger or better from that point. That was the height of it. He was 30 years old, and he died at age 33.
Oh,
Jesus started his ministry at 30, and he died at 33. Okay,
how did he die?
that's interesting. On a cross?
That's good to know.
Boom, boom.
Well, so Alexander the Great died on a cross.
Yeah, he did. No. How did he die? Oh my goodness. Was he poisoned? Or am I thinking of Antiochus Epiphanes? I don't know. I'll have to go look it up. I don't remember. But he died very early, obviously.
There's a lot on 1999. It's a big deal.
So let's look at Antiochus Epiphanes now. His name means, now this was like his name he gave himself, right? He was probably called,
They said his people gave him the epiphany.
yeah, his name was probably like Harold Jones or something like that. Anyway, so Antiochus Epiphanes means God manifested. Well, I'm not going to do that to you. So he died at 50 years old. He reigned for 11 years. The number 50 is kind of a connector. And 11, right? 11 not only means, like biblically speaking, it means judgment, but also you've got the 12 Psalms of Asaph, and you've got the one that's dislocated, so you got 11 in one group. It just happens to be that Psalm 50 is the dislocated one. It's interesting to me when I see numbers like that. So in 167 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes retook Jerusalem. They lost it for a little while. He retook Jerusalem and enforced Hellenization on the Jews. Everybody know what Hellenization is? He was forcing them to worship, to stop Judaism. Could no longer keep the law, do the Torah, any of that, right? It was all about, they had to worship the Greek gods at that point. And of course, there was a revolt then. This all happened, actually. You know, they say the silent years in the Bible from Malachi to Matthew, the 400 years where like nothing happened. Well, all of this happened during that time. There wasn't nothing silent about it. It's just that it isn't in our Bible. It's in several other books like 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So, he set up a statue of Zeus in the temple. Guess how long that statue was in the temple? It's about 3.5 years, from 167 to 164 BC. He also sacrificed a large pig on the altar in the temple. These events are part of a pattern of the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel and Jesus in Matthew 24. So think about it, how all of this happened in the thing was set up, and 3.5 years later, the Maccabees actually were doing like guerrilla warfare, and they took it back. That's where Hanukkah comes from, the cleansing of the temple.
Grace Church has actually been, the pastor's been talking about almost this exact.
Oh, really? Yeah, so
Right there.
the Feast of Dedication is what Hanukkah was called. Even in the Bible, in the New Testament, says that Jesus went to the Feast of Dedication. So Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. So it's not like some crazy thing when we think, well, you've got to say Christmas or whatever. Well, Hanukkah's legit too, right? Kwanzaa, not so much. So that was called the Maccabean Revolt, and they retook it. So to me, it's interesting that in this story you have a 50, you have an 11, you have a 3.5, because according to Revelation 12, when this abomination of desolation is set up again, it'll be 3.5 years. Well, actually, that goes back to Daniel and Matthew 24. You'll have 3.5 years until the end. Exactly like this, okay? These patterns aren't there for us to just gloss over and think, nothing to see here. So now, also, Antiochus Epiphanes was known through the Jewish tradition as the Ha-Rasha. Has anybody, probably not there yet, but in the Psalms, the Antichrist figure, I think it's in Psalm 10, which is an Antichrist psalm, he's called the Rasha in that psalm.
He calls himself a god.
Yeah, which means the wicked. So he's the wicked one, which in Hebrew is Rasha. I just think all of those interconnections are just so perfect. Okay, so now let's look at the Roman Emperor Nero. He died at 30 years old. He reigned for 14 years. As we all know, he killed many Christians after the fire of Rome. Now this is where it gets interesting, but you got to put your thinking cap on here. So in 67 AD, Nero, this guy who loved to kill Christians, he's probably responsible for Peter being hung upside down on a cross, and also for Paul's beheading. That's what scholars believe. It was Nero who did that. It was under his rule that it happened. So in 67, now we know the temple was destroyed in 70, so we're around 3 years before that. Nero sent Vespasian to Jerusalem to put down the uprising that had begun. 3.5 years later, the temple was destroyed. So it's about 3.5 years if you look at the dates that they think they know. That's interesting right there, 3.5 years, right? Then around 3.5 years later, after the temple was destroyed, which now is a 7-year total period of time, General Titus, he went and we talked about this before, and I don't know who knows all this stuff or not, but you ever heard of the Zealots?
Yeah.
You ever heard of Masada? Okay, so Masada is, Herod had built this temple complex on top of a mountain called Masada in Israel. It's in the Negev, okay? And these zealots, when all of this was going on, they were kind of like, well, they were rebels basically, but they were zealous for God and for the Torah. And they escaped from Jerusalem and Judea, that area, and they went to Masada, and they were held up, surviving in this mountain fortress, okay? The Romans were determined to kill them. So they're way up there, and there's no way into this place. So what they did is they built like an earthen siege ramp over a year or so. I don't know, it took a long time to do it. They built this, and they went up, and basically they broke through the wall, and they found that they had all killed themselves. And basically what they did is that, because none of them, I should restate that, none of them wanted to kill themselves.
The Zealots all killed themselves?
Yeah. They did not want to be taken by the Romans. They didn't want to be made to do Roman practices. They didn't want to be slaves to the Roman Empire. And so what they did, so that they didn't kill themselves, because they knew that that wasn't, a godly thing to do, is they had like one would slay another, and then another person would slay him, and they went back and forth until like the last person, I think, had to like kill himself, right? So it's like they were drawing straws, I guess, I don't know. But anyways, it's really horrible. So when the Romans finally broke through, which happened to be 3.5 years after the temple was torn down, for a total of 7 years that this whole tribulation period was going on in Israel, right? For that amount of time, they broke through and found that they were all dead already. So all those dates and numbers are really interesting to me. So now here's General Titus. He was the one that besieged Jerusalem and was all part of this. He became an emperor eventually. So General Titus was 30 years old when he marched on Jerusalem around Passover in 70 AD. He was around 33.5 years old when the Zealots on the mountain fortress of Masada were overrun by the Romans. All of the Zealots were killed, blah, blah, blah. I already told you about all that. But see, isn't that interesting? He was 30, and then at the end of their 7-year tribulation, if you want to put it that way, he was 33 and a half. Is God trying to tell us something about these ages and these numbers? Especially 30 to 33? No. So, last week as I was looking at all of this, I was just like, wow, I wish I'd known this when I was writing the book, but I keep finding more and more things, and I started thinking, so there's the 30, 31, 32, 33, into about 34, time frame, because a year is weird, right? It's a 12 months, on one number, it's 12 months period of time. So again, depending on where you fall in there. So then I thought, well, let me go look, because I've always believed that there were more things encrypted in the Psalms. So I looked at Psalm 30, thinking, well, 30 years old, I keep seeing that number over and over. In Psalm 30, there are these key phrases and words like, lifted me up, saved me from my foes, kept me alive, and thanks forever. Okay? So if that Psalm 30 matches the time when the Israelites have to flee, which is Revelation 12, Matthew 24, 15, when they have to flee into the fortress, just like the Zealots did, it would be at the 3.5-year mark, when they see the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist sets himself up in the kingdom and declares he's God, they will know, because they've read the Bible, that we have to flee. Okay, we have to go to our Masada, wherever that's at. Maybe it is Masada, I don't know. Okay, this all seems to tie in. Then you look at Psalm 31. Now they would actually be in the fortress, being protected. Revelation chapter 12 tells us that God has this place, and he's going to protect his remnant through that 3.5 years, okay? So now Psalm 31 was to be the first year, going into the second year of them being there. The Lord is my rock, my refuge, and my fortress. Psalm 32. Now we're working on like the third year that they would be there. Key words. Hiding place. And it talks about a flood as in an army, because the Antichrist has to try to kill them. He's not just going to leave them alone, right? He has to destroy them, or he has no hopes. Satan has no hopes for having a future if he doesn't destroy them. He's going to do everything he can to destroy them. Psalm 33, which would be the equivalent of 2031 or 2032, it says, all the earth fear the Lord. Stand in awe of him. This is Jesus' comeback. The council of nations is nothing. And I'm paraphrasing because I just wrote these in my notes and I typed it real fast today. He, as in God, considers all man's works. No king is saved by the multitude of his army or his strength. He will deliver his own from death. This is God will deliver his own from death. Our soul waits for the Lord. We hope in him. If you understand the 3.5 years, and you know what Israel's going to go through in that refuge, it literally says refuge and fortress in here, and you know the end of that, when the Armageddon happens and the world is going to come against them to try to destroy this protected encampment of the 1/3 of Israel that remains, because 2/3, according to Zechariah 12, are going to be destroyed. 1/3 will remain. They're in this refuge. That's exactly what Psalm 33 is saying. So here's another set of Psalms based on, the 30-year-old, the 31, 32, 33, 33 and a half, let's say, that aligns perfectly. And if you mix these up in any other order, it doesn't make sense anymore. I don't think any of this is a coincidence. So now I got to write another book. No. I think I'm done writing books.
If you're right, you don't have time. You gotta just.
Yeah, that's